Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Durr. I am the branch manager at the Watson branch of the Livingston Parish Library. And today I am very excited to be able to chat with an author about her new book, Finn Rogers and the Heart of Elvelon, with Louisiana children's author Bridget Plunkett.
Hi there, I'm Bridget Plunkett. This is my book. If you can
Oh,
see it,
that's like a
Finn
gorgeous.
Rogers and the Heart of Elvelon.
Love that.
Um, I'm from Louisiana. I'm actually from Jackson Parish, so I'm very excited to share my book with you guys. I'm a nurse by profession, but I'm a writer at heart, so this was very exciting. This is my first book, so I'm very excited to share it with you guys.
Yay. Okay. So you say you're a nurse and that's like your full-time job and
Yes,
you're like wrote on the side and you finally got this book out. So
yes,
that was
I
like
did.
your passion project.
Yes, it was. It's actually going to be a series. So this is just book one. So book one in the series. I know I have at least three ideas for three books, but
Wow.
as I start writing the second one, I'm like, oh, but I've got to do this. So there's no
Who
telling how
knows
many
what
books.
could unfold.
Who
Gotcha.
knows where it's going to go? I know at least I want three books. So this is the first one. This one is actually set in two different places because it's a fantasy book. It has Elvalon is one of the realms, Earth is one of the realms, and then there's four other realms. So I could like venture off to several different places if I wanted to. This
Right.
one's based on Earth and in Elvalon, so they kind of go back and forth using the portal to get to the different realms. So there's no telling where I'm going to go after I leave Elvalon and Earth. So it's
Lots to
exciting.
explore. That's
Yes.
so fun. Okay, so you said it is a fantasy book, and I am a huge advocate of children reading not only fiction, but especially fantasy.
Mhm.
So, what inspired you to write fantasy for children? And also, what called you to write this story, Finn Rogers and the Heart of Elvelon? If you can, like, give us.
Okay, so I know as a child myself in like sixth, seventh, eighth grade, they would do the read alouds. So
Mhm.
each year, well, several times a year, they would pick a book and we would take turns reading it throughout the school year. So some of my favorites were like Summer of the Monkeys, Indian in the Cupboard, Miss Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. I mean, it's endless the number of books that we'd read, and it excited me. Like I loved that part of school, elementary school, grade school. I loved it. So I kind of wanted, my kids were that age when I
Right.
started writing this book. They were actually in third and fourth grade, so they were just getting into chapter books. So I homeschooled them in third and fourth grade, and we went to the Grand Canyon. So on our way there, we stopped through Arizona, New Mexico. We drove into the Navajo Nation actually, and bought a whole bunch of different trinkets. I don't have them with me right now, but I have I have a pot that was handmade by a Navajo lady. Um, all kinds of things that we bought there. So that wasn't the reason, but it just kind of got me interested in the Native Americans.
Right.
So I went back and was talking to my grandmother, and we actually have Cherokee and I can't remember the other Indian tribe, but my my grandmother, my grandmother's grandmother, and my grandfather's grandmother were both Indians. So I kind of got excited and was like looking up traditions of Native Americans, and that's when it kind of spiraled into, oh, what if this happened? So that's
Right.
kind of where the Native American background came from.
Mhm.
But I didn't want to hijack any tribes. So I kind of made up my own. So I was like, oh, I'm
Right.
going to
It
call
was
them the Navi
used as an
Indian.
inspiration for your fantasy story.
Yes, yes. Because I'm like, what if the Indians aren't like really Indians? What if they're from somewhere else? They're magical. So that's where
That's
Elvalon came from,
gotcha.
because the Navi Indians are actually Elvalonians on Earth protecting something. So
Oh, wow.
all their traditions are stemmed from magic. So that's why
Gotcha. Okay.
they
Yeah,
are.
because that's such a beautiful, because I have Native American ancestry as well, and it's such a beautiful culture and just like way
Yes,
of life. So
yes.
that's really
The
cool.
earthly magical aspect of it.
Yes, very much so. So that's like really cool. So that really what brought you into wanting to write, like you had your children and you went on this like wonderful trip as it sound like
Yes.
what it sounded like.
Grand Canyon. It's awesome.
Yes, yeah, that sounds amazing. So was that the so that was the inspiration for the setting and the Native American aspect.
Yes.
So what made you like Finn himself? What kind of gave you the inspiration to write these specific characters and his journey?
Okay, well, me being a nurse, um, I don't know if I read something in a journal. I was reading something medically, a magazine or something. I probably was actually studying because I'm still in nursing school. So I don't know. I just had a dream one day about a little boy who was sick and he needed a heart transplant.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of spiraled, and then I don't know how it all mashed together, but it did. And I just started writing stuff down. And then my kids, again, we were homeschooling. So I was like, hey, what if I wrote something about this? And they were like, oh, you could name it this. So they were actually part of the process of naming things, naming the characters. My son, Xander, he's like really into mythology type things. He can tell you any type of god or goddess and where they came from and their background and what their story is, their kids. He can tell you the whole.
So is he a huge fan of
He
like
loves
Rick
it.
Riordan and the Percy Jackson?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. He likes that type of thing.
You're right.
So he helped me name some of the things. He's like, well, this is from Greek and this is from Latin. So we were looking up words and
Oh,
mashing.
wow. That's so
Like
cool.
Presidio means protector. So that was actually one of my characters' names in here is Presidio. So
That's cool.
we just kind of mashed it
So
all
it was
together.
almost like a whole family. This book
Yes.
is like a joint effort.
Yes.
That's
Especially
really
with naming.
cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so it's really funny that you mention you know, reading and with your children and you coming in and finding different types of books, because as a librarian we help so many of this age demographic find books that they might be interested in, and this kind of like genre is very popular. And it's just really funny, like what you're saying as a librarian and what we've seen. I'm like, yes, like I get what you're saying. I get everything. So that's really cool. So fantasy specifically, like I said, is like one of my favorites. And it's so interesting to me because it's so unlike our own world, yet it's so similar, because I feel like authors draw from our world to create, you know, these other worlds. And I'm always constantly in awe of authors' imaginations and creativity. So as an author, what's your favorite types of scenes to write? And how do you come up with the like fantasy aspects of your stories?
I like writing dialogue. I really do like writing dialogue. It doesn't even matter what it's about.
Right.
And then fight scenes.
There's some good banter in there.
Yes. And I like that. Okay, so one of my reviews was talking about, it gave a Goonies feel. I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was going for, was the Goonies. Like,
oh,
Goonies
that's great. That's like, that's what you were doing, and that's what people got out of it.
When she said that, I was like, that's exactly what I was going for. The bike ride at the beginning, the banter back and forth with the kids, the friendships.
Yes.
So that was amazing that she picked up on. That was what I was actually zooming in on.
Right.
And Stranger Things. I love those type movies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look at my coffee mug. Mornings are for coffee and contemplation.
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, go Hopper. But, I mean, that's kind of, I like fight scenes because it's a challenge. It's a challenge to actually get people to picture what you're seeing in your head and to actually project it onto you know, the pages.
Right. And for them to play that scene in their head like a movie.
So I actually would watch movies and then I would sit down and like write what happened and then see if I could pick up the action itself and put it into words. Like,
that's actually crazy. A really good writing tip.
Good practice. Yes. It's a good practice to do that.
Okay, cool. That's a really good tip. Because, you know, when you think about it, like when you're writing these things, like as an author, you have to write, like, let's say a fight scene, but like nobody knows how to do like swords and like, you know, stuff like that.
He turned. You're like,
yeah, so you have
better than that.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's a good tip for some aspiring authors. That's really cool. So what was your favorite, like, who's your favorite character in the story, and like what drew you to them as your favorite character? If you
I would have
one.
to say my favorite character is Tempest. She is the misunderstood villain of the book. So there's two main villains in this book. There's Knox. He's just like the mentor of Tempest, but Tempest is really the main villain in this book because she's after the heart. She wants it. She wants it for a reason. And she wants it for a good reason, but she's so misunderstood. And accidents happen, and then that made her look even worse. So I kind of want you to like not like her, but at the same time kind of root for her. You're like, oh, well, maybe. I hope I pulled that off in here. There was a couple of people said, oh, you kind of want to not like Tempest, but then you feel sorry for her. I was like, that's what I was going for. So great.
I feel like
So,
that's a good thing about any like conflicted like villain character. Like you want to
mhm.
feel conflicted about them, then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to like them. What does that mean about me? Like it's just a good archetype to have. Like one of my favorite characters is Loki from the Marvel universe. Like
Yes,
he's
he's just
okay.
misunderstood.
He's not a villain, first off, just saying. But like he's so misunderstood, and he's so like you see the conflict and you see him want to do these different things. So I love that as a character.
hmm
Um so is that fun to write as an author?
Yes, and it's
Like
fun to try. Like I said, it's challenging. It's very challenging. Villains are challenging because you want them to be bad. You want people to not like them, but at the same time, you're like, but what if I throw in this? You're gonna
right.
have a different feeling for her.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Tempest was my favorite.
Gotcha. And most villains like they don't think they're doing anything wrong. Like
Right,
most villains aren't just like I'm going to be evil today unless you're like Dr. Evil. But
right.
most of them think they're doing something right. So that's where
Mhm.
you get that confliction. So I like that's really cool that you said that's your favorite character. I feel like that would be like a fun kind of character and
Yeah, she was a
challenging
fun
but like
character.
interesting. Awesome. Okay. Um so I'm sure many people and me included have this like grand intentions of writing a novel. Everybody's probably like so many people have probably said, oh, I want to write a book, I have this idea, but I'm sure the process can be very like daunting in itself. So
Yes.
for you, what was the process of beginning your novel?
Okay, so when I first started, I watched way too much AuthorTube. So like I got on YouTube and looked, I watched so many videos on what's the best writing tips. I bought a few books. I have the Chicago Manual of Style because that's
Mm-hmm.
what most fantasy authors use when they're writing their books. And then I have, let's see, the Writer's Idea Thesaurus. Okay, so if you want some practice, that just has these random things in there. It says, like, man goes to get coffee and realizes there's aliens in his yard and they're after his dog. So it's crazy stuff, but then you have to write about that.
Right.
So
And
it
that
gives
just
you
gets you.
practice
Okay.
on things that you're like, this is my goal to write about. So I need to write 500 words about this. So it gives you practice. And
Right.
then the other book that I have, I should go get it. Your First Novel. So
Mm-hmm.
let me hold on. So it's actually Your First Novel. It's written by several different authors, but
Mm-hmm.
this right here was so good. I read this whole thing
Ooh.
before I even started.
Okay.
So it gives you tips and ideas about being repetitive,
Mm-hmm.
using the word said. Don't be afraid to use the word said. It's
I
been there. That's what it's there for.
right. I
You
did
can't
see
always say
somewhere.
she squealed. Nobody squeals a word.
Right. I did see somewhere that like the I said, she said, he said is almost like invisible. And it like
Yes.
the reader sees it, but it's invisible. So you can say it like it's not a big deal. I did
Yeah.
hear that one. So that's
Because
cool.
you can only say said so many ways without
Right.
being repetitive. So just say it. Just say
Right.
said. Or
Okay.
leave it out. But
Right.
it gives you all kinds of tips like that.
Wow.
Um,
Okay. So that's
Points of view.
interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
So
do that. So you would suggest doing that before you start writing or before you
bef-
like start your novel. You can maybe
if you
write.
have, yeah, if you have a story in mind already, just start writing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're like, I think I might want to write a book, research on how to do that first, because then
Gotcha.
that sets you up. Like for one of the tips, it was just write one sentence about each chapter,
Mm-hmm.
about how you want it to go, which is an outline. That's what it is, an
Right.
outline.
Right.
So then once you make that outline, then write a few words after each chapter. And I actually, that's what I have my second book here. It's
Wow.
3 pages long, but this is the outline of the second book. So I might follow it, I might not. I'm definitely a planner. I plan things out.
Same.
But with my first book, it did not go as I planned. It went way off on a tangent. So I had to change all of the outline.
Right.
And I'll probably do that with this too, but at least I have a direction.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
make an outline, grammar, practice your grammar because Grammarly and pro writing aids, things that you can actually purchase to help you, only go so far.
Right. Right.
learn the different voices, passive voice, active voice, points of view. Like I was head hopping in my book, and my editor pointed it out. She's like, you're head hopping here in this whole chapter. You're in like 4 different people's head. Whose head do you want to be in? So I had to kind of change up some wording so I wasn't head hopping. So
Gotcha.
there's things like that you learn as you're writing,
Mm-hmm.
but you just have to write. You have to write it. Like
I
I had
feel
to
like that's
finish.
the biggest thing that any author could like give as a thing to do is write, and I feel like that's so underrated because like I was a creative writing major, and I used to write like in college, and then I just haven't done it because I've been working and this and that, and so now I'm like I just need to write, so
Yes.
inspire me. Like
And like set a timer and just say, I'm going to write for 15 minutes today. Set your timer on your phone and just start writing. Just look at your outline. What am I writing about today? Boom. And just hit it. And then stop and then like, okay, let it rest. Don't try to edit it right then. Move on to your next thing and just keep writing, keep writing. Because the way I actually finished the book was NaNoWriMo. So
really,
it's November of 2019.
wow.
I had about 20,000 words written. I was like, I'm going to finish this thing. So the first couple of days, I went through that 20,000 words and kind of wrote down some things. Because at that time, I did not have an outline. That's why I'm saying outlines are important. I wrote an outline and then I finished the other 30-something thousand words. So it ended up being
Wow.
55,000 words. I finished it November the 29th. I was so excited. It was a day early.
Wow, that's
So,
amazing.
yes. I'm like, it's done. It is done.
That's great. So was Finn Rogers your first book? This was your first
Yes.
one?
I have written like this probably really, it's an adult romance novel, but it was more like a novella. It was only 30,000 words,
Right.
but I shelved it. I was like, I don't want anybody to read this, but I wrote it. So
And it
it's
was
practice.
practice and
Yes.
experience to get
Yes.
you to the next one.
Like my mom and a few other friends wrote it like, oh, you should put this on Wattpad. I'm like, I'm not putting that anywhere. It's going right here. And I may revisit it and fix it up, but at the same time, it was practice. It was writing. It was getting used to doing dialogue. It was getting used to doing action and um, the flow of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps. Even if it's trash, just write it.
Right. Because you hear a lot of times of like authors, and especially big authors, they say, their first published book was not their first written book. Or, their first written book
Yes.
just kind of like is sitting on a shelf or just never got
Yes.
around. And, and then some of them will revisit it later.
Hmm.
So you do hear that a lot. Okay.
Yes.
Good to know. Good to know that like, even if you have written something and you hate it or, you're not into it, at least you got that. You did that. And
You've
then
got
you
it.
can move on to something else that might call to you a little bit more. Okay.
Yes.
That's some good tips. Okay. So another daunting process for potential authors is the path to publishing. So how was the publishing process for you?
Okay, so before I even started, I knew in my mind I wanted to self-publish. Again, like I
Okay.
said, I watched way too many AuthorTube videos,
Mm-hmm.
and I do know that if you do self-publish, you have your say in what the cover looks like.
Right.
I love my cover.
It's great.
I
Yeah.
love my cover. So this might not have looked like this if I was traditionally published because they have their own cover artist. They have their own say in how they want the story to go. So there may be an aspect in the book that they're like, you know what, cut that part. I want to change it to this. So you have to kind of write based on what they want you to write.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I chose self-publishing. You can do the traditional route. I know that takes a lot longer.
Yeah, there's like query letters and, trying to
Query
find an
letters, finding an
agent.
agent, yes, and then that agent finding a publisher, and yeah, so it's a longer process. I did not speed this up. Like I told you, I wrote this in November of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
It did not get actually published till December the 1st because I
Gotcha.
actually did a
Mm-hmm.
manuscript critique first because I wanted to see if somebody that was in the writing world could read it and understand it and it made sense to them.
Right.
It flowed well. Were there any plot holes? And when she sent it back, she was like, wow, it followed it well. She didn't really give a whole lot of suggestions, except for some nursing tips. She's like, do you really think that this could happen? I'm like, yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
it happen.
Yeah. That's
I'm a
the
nurse. I don't need
expertise.
medical.
Yeah.
I don't need medical advice. Did it make sense? That's what I want to know. So she said it flowed well. So I was excited about that. I did have beta readers.
Okay.
I actually had beta readers read it first. I had about 20 of my friends, family, sometimes strangers. I posted it on Facebook and said, hey, I'm needing some beta readers. I would send them 2 chapters at a time. They would read it and they'd send back like, hey, you said they were in Arizona here and now they're in New Mexico. I went, oh, let me fix that. So it was things
Gotcha.
like that.
So
Like she
that
had
was really
bracelets
helpful.
on. Yeah, before I even sent it for the editor. Because what the beta readers catch is plot holes.
Right.
Like at one point, Danielle, one of the characters, that's funny, that's your name. Uh, one of the characters had these bracelets on that were keeping her magic. She wasn't able to, she's a fire starter.
Mhm.
So she wasn't able to use her magic because these bracelets were, had her bound. Well, then they magically just disappeared later in the book. I'm like, oh gosh, you're right. I have to go back and say how she got them off. So things like that, beta readers
Gotcha.
catch.
And see, and that's, you know, your story, and as you're writing it and you read it a million times, so things kind of like
Yeah,
fall away. So a new set of
yes,
eyes can really like
absolutely. The more
change that.
eyes, the
Okay.
better.
Okay.
More
Good to
eyes, the
know.
better.
That's a good tip for sure. So
Mhm.
what avenue, like you said you self-published, and how did you research self-publish or decide like which self-publishing method was best for you? Because I know like you can do Amazon, you can do like there's tons of different things. How'd you research it and figure out which one you wanted?
Well, when I did do research, I know Amazon, the Kindle Select was one of the big ways a lot of people use Amazon advertising
Mm-hmm.
for their book. I'm more of a like in-person kind of, I
Right.
had 2 book signings. I did a lot of Facebook giveaways, things like that to actually just get my book out there, promotional things, marketing. Because even if you traditionally publish, you have to market your book.
Right.
The publisher's not going to market your book. They're just going to put it in stores. You have to actually do the marketing part. So I'm like, if I have to do all the work anyway, I'm
Might as
gonna,
well.
I'm just gonna
Right.
self-publish. I know it's not gonna be in bookstores like I want it to, but maybe one day, I don't know.
Yeah.
Indie bookstores,
Mhm.
is doing a lot of calling. Libraries.
There
I'm
you
actually
go.
donating to the libraries. Like if a library wants a copy, I'm like, hey, let me send it to you.
That's great. Yeah,
And I
because then
also,
you can get the word out too. Yeah.
yes, and I also am trying to get in touch with libraries to get it in the Renaissance, the AR points.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only way to do that is to get several different libraries to petition and say, hey,
Gotcha.
we want to evaluate this book for AR points. And the more
Okay.
libraries I have, they'll actually look into it, read it, make a test for it, and it'll have AR point value.
Right,
So
because that's a huge aspect of
getting this age group to
now, and
read.
that exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Because you don't have as
we get
many
that
people
tons.
that just want to read.
Right, right. And then if you do, you know, the AR points kind of some people like it's a catch-22. There's some people who are just like annoyed by the AR points and there's like what can I do just to get the most things? And then there's some that, you know, they'll just get 100 points just because they've already established their love of reading. So, but
Yes.
that is good to get
An
your
incentive,
book
read it.
right, your book with those
Like,
points,
it's
and then
good,
that,
just read
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so that's good to know. Okay, so I know you mentioned that you have more ideas for this Finn Rogers and the Heart of Elvelon series, but do you have any other book ideas planned, or can you talk more about anything that you have planned for this series? Any future?
Yes, actually. Okay, so in this book, I'm not going to give it all away, but 14-year-old Finn, he's sick. He needs a heart. Juno is from Elvelon. He's the prince of Elvelon. And part of the prince of that whole realm, that kingdom, the prince's job always, for the last 500 years, has been they are the keeper of the gateway. So the gateway is the portal between all the realms. And his job as the keeper of the gateway is he uses this compass called the orbis, and he can open it up and he can go to all the realms. So the heart of Elvelon, my little jewel in the middle, is actually housed on Earth. It's the power source of Elvelon. Because centuries ago, Earth was like magical. Well, humans couldn't handle the magic. They were too greedy, they were after power. So all of the magic on Earth was placed in Elvelon. That's where it was created. That's where it came from. That's where that realm came from. But there was a struggle between 2 twins that were princes. You know, the prince is the gatekeeper. So the king thought he was doing a favor and made another orbis, but it was evil because he used dark magic to make it. That was the only way he could make it. Well, it turned that prince evil. So to keep the heart safe from him, it was hidden on Earth. So the story is about them trying to protect the heart. Juno comes to Earth. Him and Finn together, the heart was stolen, have to find the heart, get it back to where it needs to be, and get Finn back home safely with all of his friends. So I can't tell you what happened because then it gives the whole thing away. But Finn, he becomes not sick anymore. So, and then like my manuscript critique, she actually said that's an iffy thing, making somebody that's sick not sick again using magic, because I guess it's controversial. Like you can't just magically be well, but this is fantasy. Like
It's fantasy.
what sick little boy doesn't want to be a hero?
Right.
So that's kind of the idea.
I've read a lot of books where people were either dead or came back alive, or so in fantasy you can play with these elements, and that's why we have fantasy. Right.
And that wasn't my intent to make any sick kid think, oh, I wish I could, be well. And I do wish they could be well, but that wasn't the intent when I wrote it. But Finn gets a new heart and he's all better. And so it actually has a dual meaning, that Heart of Elvelon, like he plays a part in it. But it has such a bigger picture, and you find out at the end of this book what part he plays in the bigger picture for real, not just a circumstance. He's actually very important. So
so that's where you can branch off and go to
that's where you can branch off.
Gotcha.
So, and it has a lot to do with the villain's tied into all of it. It's all a prophecy that's a boy from the Four Corners was going to restore the Heart of Elvelon. So here he is, my boy from the Four Corners. And there's the heart. So it's all.
That sounds a lot of fun. And that sounds like something that I can see a lot of kids in that age group would enjoy that. Like that's the type of book request that we see so much, and the interest level, that sounds like it would be very popular.
Portal jumping and going to other realms and
like the fun stuff, the good stuff.
Carpet rides, magic carpets and dragons and castles and all that's in here.
I'm feeling that. Yes, I like that. That's a lot of fun. So we can definitely expect to see more from Finn and his friends. And
absolutely.
Elvelon and all of that.
Yes. Fantastic. Book 2 is actually Finn Rogers in the Shadow of the Sphinx. So that gives you an idea of the setting of where they're going to be.
Yes. Oh, I'm excited. I think this sounds great. I want to read it. I'm going to figure out how to read it soon. So that's going to be.
I have to send y'all a book. I have to send y'all 2 at least.
Yes, definitely. And then we can put it on our system and everybody can read it. So that would be so much. That would be great. Okay. So last question. Can you give any just like last words of wisdom for aspiring writers?
Just write. Like just do the work. Even if it's garbage, even if at the end of the day you're like, oh, let me erase it. You still wrote. You just have to keep going. And there's things like Camp NaNoWriMo that's in July. NaNoWriMo National Novel Writing Month is in November. The goal is to write 50,000 words. Participate in those things. Have your own little sprints. I know Twitter, I don't know if you know Kim Chance, she wrote Seeker and Keeper and things like that. So she has little writing sprints at like 7, 8 o'clock sometimes at night. And she's like, okay, on your mark, set, go, let's just write. And for 15 minutes, you just sit down and write. So just find a time, carve it out. Everybody's like, oh, I'm so busy. But everybody has 15 minutes. Like, everybody.
I just binge watch a whole season of a TV show yesterday, so I had
me too.
Time.
Me too. So I finished the whole series. So I'm like, okay, now I can write today.
Right.
So everybody has 15 minutes, and that's all it takes to get started. And then sometimes that 15 turns into an hour. Sometimes that hour turns into 3, and before you know it, you've written 6,000 words.
Wow.
So yes.
Okay.
So just write. Make time to write.
Those are some good words of wisdom. I feel like you're speaking to me. And read, because you have to know. Yeah, yes. It goes hand in hand. Like you have to kind of understand being a reader in order to properly be a writer.
That's like Stephen King's biggest advice for writers is read. You've got to read to write. I'm like, oh, makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
It helps you make your own style. So
right. And then that just goes to show that readers. And, if you really love reading, you can be a writer if you just sit down and write. You can do it.
Sit down and write.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That's some great words of wisdom. Thank you again for coming and talking to us, me, today about your book. It sounds fantastic. I can't wait to read it. And for those of you that are watching, if you want to read this book, let us know. And hopefully we can get it in the library and you can check it out. Sounds like it would be a lot of fun and very popular, and a lot of people would like it. And if you want to see any more authors or you want to hear about anything else, let us know in the comments too. We love to hear what you like to see, what you want to see. And thank you again, Bridget, for coming on and talking with us and sharing your book with us. It sounds great.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. And until next time, guys, happy reading.